Hey tea heads, this is Don from Mayleaf. In this video, I'm going to be giving you my tips on how best to brew Yan Cha Rock Oolong. Before we get into it, a couple of caveats. Of course, you brew you, however you want to brew your tea. If you want to take your leaves and chuck them in, boil them up in a pan, or you want to brew them in ice water, do whatever you would like to do. This is not gospel. This is just the result of my own little experiments to try to get the best out of this tea type. And secondly, every Yancha is different, from quality, from low quality to high quality, and all the different varieties, all the different areas. So there's not going to be any one rule or one style of brewing that's going to suit every single type of Yancha out there. But I hope that this video is going to give you some guidance, and also you might be surprised about my conclusions on how to best brew this tea type. And the reason why I'm sort of diving into this tea type in particular, and we can do brewing guides on all the tea types if you want, but especially this tea type, is because I have found myself quite frustrated with brewing Yancha over the years. And if you look online, there's a whole variety of different methods of brewing Yancha, from very, very short infusions to longer infusions, smaller amount of leaf, larger amount of leaf. And I find that oftentimes the smell of the dry leaf in a hot guy one is so mesmerizing, is so impactful, and yet it doesn't seem to translate when I brew it in the cup, in the mouth. It doesn't seem to have the same wow factor that the smell has. And it's sort of frustrating to me because I'm thinking, I'm sure I can get more out of this tea type. Also, another thing that I find frustrating sometimes with Yancha is that I find that the session doesn't have any particular peak moment where you just go, wow, this is it. And it tends to end a little bit sort of quickly. Oftentimes you don't get that many infusions out of a Yancha, 6, 7, 8, something like that. And there was never that moment where you just go, this is it, it's now singing right now. Oftentimes with like green teas, you might only get sort of 5 really good infusions out, but you know that there's going to be 2 or 3 infusions which are just the bomb. Whereas with Yancha, I always feel like I'm sort of searching for the right parameters to get that peak moment. So that's why I've been experimenting with Yancha, and I've been experimenting over the past few weeks with Yancha. But really, this whole journey on trying to get the best out of Yancha has been over many years. And in fact, I remember a very key moment when I was in the Wuyi Mountains, where this tea type comes from. I was drinking tea with a tea farmer, and I was amazed because he put a lot of leaf in a Gai one, probably something in the region of sort of 7, 8 grams per 100 ml Gai one. And he poured over the hot water, and then he just was chatting. And I was watching this Gai one. I'm sure this has happened with some of you out there, where you're just looking at the brew and you're thinking, when are you going to pour? When are you going to pour? When are you going to pour? This went on. It was probably around, I don't know, 45 seconds, maybe even a minute. And I was just staring, going, oh my gosh, this is just going to be way overbrewed. But when I tasted that tea, there was something about the tea that really captured me. And I thought, okay, maybe I've been brewing Yancha all wrong for so many years, and I need to really dive into it. So I've been playing around, and this is the result of my experiments. But of course, do your own experiments. This is just a starting guide. I have in front of me here some new Yancha in stock. This is Cheru, also known as Stone Milk. This is a very, very famous heirloom cultivar, original old cultivar, which is hardly ever produced, or produced in much smaller quantities compared to the more common Shui Shen, Rogui, and other more popular cultivars. It's said that this type of tea, the Cheru tea, is much harder to produce to get the best out of it. And it certainly has a long, long history dating back to the Yuan dynasty. It was an imperial tribute in the Song dynasty. In fact, this tea cultivar, the Cheru cultivar, was synonymous with Wuyi Rock Oolongs. Cheru means stone milk, so you can see that it's really reflecting this essence of the rock, which obviously is what Yancha is famous for. So this is new in stock, and you can go check it out online. And I'm using this as my test case, but all the tips that I'm going to be giving you in this video will apply to any Yancha as starting guidance from which you can play and experiment. Let's take a look at these leaves. Classic Yancha look, dark, roasted, strip oolong, medium leaves. And because they are dark and they are larger leaves compared to sort of green tea pickings, you have a tea which is low in catechins or lower in catechins. And catechins are the compound which predominantly impart a bitter flavor. And therefore, with Yancha, you have generally a lower bitterness tea. It's worth bearing that in mind as we move forward into this video. The other thing that you probably notice if you are, drink a lot of Yancha is that generally the leaves feel a lot more delicate than, for example, Dansong, which comes from Guangdong province. This is another very aromatic oolong. And they have a sort of thin, slightly papery sort of quality about them. And I'm not sure exactly the cause of this. It's probably a combination of the cultivar, the processing, and certainly the roasting probably makes it a little bit more delicate. But the result is that you have a tea where the leaves feel a little bit fragile. And I think that leads to people thinking that they have to be a bit careful about not over brewing them because it's quite a thin leaf. And so maybe what I'm going to be saying to you today is a little bit counterintuitive as we get into brewing times. And also, I think we should talk about the overall characteristic of Yancha. Of course, there's a vast variation, but overall, the characteristics of Yancha, since they're oolongs, they have a lot of aromatics, so a very aroma-rich tea. And also, they're very renowned for their texture and for their aftertaste and finish. So you've probably heard, or you may have heard of Yan Yun, which is this way of describing the character of these Yanchas, often talked about as a sort of rock rime or the mineral feel in the mouth. I've done a whole video about Yan Yun. I'll link it in the description below. But overall, I think Yan Yun is a broader descriptor. It describes a feel in the mouth when you drink, a little catch maybe in the throat, so some sort of minerality in the mouth, but it also relates to a vaporous rising finish of aromatics and a long aftertaste. So Yan Yun sort of incorporates for me texture, taste, and aftertaste. And so we want to try to showcase the rich aromatics of this tea and also the texture, taste, and aftertaste. And as you'll see, it's that balancing which I think is the key to getting the right brew parameters for this particular tea type. And it's also worth just stating that whilst this is rich in aromatics, the aromatic profile of Yancha tends to be more in the sort of medium and low end. So you've got the roast, you've got the woods, you've got the fruits, you've got the sweetness. Of course, there are, Yanchas, including this one, that will have flowery notes, but you're never going to have the same very high transient aromatics that you get with, for example, Qingxiang Tieguanyin, like a light Tieguanyin, or even some of the more flowery, bright Dansong oolongs. And so it's worth bearing those two things in mind. It's a low bitterness tea in general. It's also the aromatics are more in the realm of medium to low in the sort of spectrum of aromatics. So maybe less transient and less hard to capture in the cup. And I just want to point those two factors out because that will explain a little bit of my thinking. All right, so here we go. Let's start this session. So I've got 5 grams of Sheru here, so stone milk, 5 grams of the same tea. I've got 2 Gaiwans here. So I recommend somewhere between 4.5 grams to 7 grams of leaf per 100 ml. So we really want to load up your brewing vessel. And because it's a strip oolong, it's going to visually seem even more voluminous, I think. So it's going to seem to occupy a lot more of the Gaiwan compared with if you put a similar amount of ball rolled oolong, of course. So it may seem quite a lot visually, and we definitely want to load up the Gai 1. So that's my recommendation. And of course, the brewing times are going to be shifting a little bit. If you're using 7 grams per 100 ml, then they're going to be shorter than 4.5 grams per 100 ml. But we'll talk about that at the end as we try to give you some sort of guidance in terms of starting parameters. Very important as well, temperature. The temperature of brewing of this particular tea is very, very important. We really want to keep the teaware hot or, warm. You don't really want temperatures to drop too much. Of course, as you go through the session, you're not going to, brew continuously, so it is going to drop, but at least at the beginning, you want really, really warm teaware. So I'm going to brew this up. I'm going to heat up these teawares with boiling water. Brewing temperature for Yancha, I would always opt for hot, so 210 Fahrenheit, 99 degrees Celsius. If your Yancha is lighter, so for example, Baijiguan, which has very visually lighter leaves, then you can drop it to maybe sort of down to about 200 Fahrenheit, 93 degrees Celsius. But really, you want the teaware to be warm, you want everything to be warm, because the aromatic hit that you get out of this tea is just immense. And also, the leaf benefits from having a very sort of hot environment, in my opinion. So we're going to let these heat up for a little bit more. And I'm just going to pour one Gai 1 away. And we're going to smell this one, so we're going to get our nose dry leaf from one and then leave that one to keep the heat so that we're relatively consistent. Before we get into smell, water I think is more than, water is always important, but having softer water for Yancha really, really, I think, gets more out of the tea. This tea is a very mineral-rich tea. It's called Rock Oolong, and this is called stone milk, and it really does have a lot of mineral quality to it. And so if you have water which is also very mineral heavy, sometimes they clash, sometimes it doesn't work. It just doesn't get the best out of the tea, and you can get tea which is a bit too aggressive. Not in terms of bitterness, but in terms of texture. So I would say, take that extra bit of time to try to get soft water if you really want to get the best out of this Yancha. Okay, so while this Gai 1 is hot, we want to smell it because it's going to be a burst of aromatics. Oh, incredible. I'm getting butterscotch. I'm getting dried cherries. I'm getting some charred woods. A little bit of like an almond brittle. Now, very important with Yancha is exploring the aromatics and the taste as temperatures change. So with the smell and with the taste, so when you're smelling it and when you're drinking it, it's important that you smell it while it's hot, smell it while it's warm, and then allow it to cool down, because there's a big shift, and the appreciation of Yancha, in order for it to be complete, you need to be experiencing the aromatics and the taste across all of those temperature ranges. See, as it cools down, I'm getting a little bit more like raspberry jam coming through, more of the fruit. I'm getting some flowers, magnolia flowers. But a lot of those dried cherries and a lot of the sort of wood and the butterscotch and like a creamy sort of dark baked biscuit note. Absolutely gorgeous. Okay, let's pour this one away. So why do I have two Gai 1s here? So I'm going to be experimenting here in front of you with time. So we talked about temperature, we talked about amount, and obviously every parameter shift is going to shift the other parameters. But if you sort of follow 5 grams, boiling hot water, heat your Gai 1 up, now we need to talk about time. Because if you look online, there's a huge variation from sort of 2 to 3 seconds, in other words, instant brews, to 20 seconds-ish, you know, for the first infusion. Usually it's sort of around 5 to 10 seconds if you look online, or you sort of explore the common knowledge about Yancha brewing. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to be brewing this one at 10 seconds, and I'm going to be brewing this one at 30 seconds, and then we're going to be adding 5 seconds per infusion. And I'm going to be skipping through the infusions, we're going to be cutting a bit, I'm going to be giving you my impression as we go. Okay, let me make sure this temperature is hot. Yeah, it's dropped, so we want to bring up that temperature. We're going to rinse this tea. You can see I've got my Jing De Gen cups here. You can see one of them is new and one of them is not. Can you guess which one has been used more? This one's brand new, I haven't drunk from it yet. That one's had about 2 months worth of use, so you can see the lovely craquelure effect that it has. I've also got another cup here for the very commonly used technique of saving the rinse of the Yancha until the end of the session. It's called the returning cup taste. And so I'm going to give you my opinion on that, but I'm going to hold back before I give you my opinion on that. So I'm going to rinse these teas, and I'm going to be pouring the rinse into this cup here, and we're going to be saving it, allowing it to cool down, and then we will see what that tastes like at the end. So this is often done with the rinse. You might do it with sort of the first infusion, although I don't think that you should, because you want to taste the first infusion while it's hot. Anyway, let's smell the wet leaf of Cheru. Oh, it's brightened up immensely. I'm still getting those cherries, but now I'm getting more fruit, like nectarines drizzled with honey. I'm getting some guava, in fact, quite a lot of guava. The flowery notes are coming through as well. I'm getting more orchid. Still getting the charred woods, of course. Still getting the almond brittles, the butterscotch. I'm also getting a little bit of that. The almond brittle maybe has lightened up to frangipane. So a lovely blend of very distinct fruits, guavas, nectarines, so quite potent. Zesty's not the right word. It's like juicy, slightly sort of sour, sweet fruits, and then the woodsy notes, the charred woods, the warm notes, the biscuits and the almond brittles, and the sweetness of honey and flowery notes. But they are occupying that, again, low to medium territory of aromatics. If you sort of think of higher aromatics being citrus and like geranium and those kinds of notes. I will also say that with Yancha, even medium quality, even low quality can have a really nice smell, but you really get to know the tea when you brew into it. Anyway, lovely, lovely smell of this Cheru. Right, let's, again, I'm always going to be checking temperature here because I always want everything to be hot. So I'm going to be brewing this one at 10 seconds plus 5, this one at 30 seconds. Big, big, big difference, okay? And I'm going to be talking through the difference in my experience, and then we can we'll go through probably the whole session, 7-8 infusions, but I'll be skipping along the way, so you're not going to see me brewing every single time. So let's go. We're going to brew 10 seconds here. So this is very common brewing parameters that you may see being sort of bandied around, is 10 seconds for the first few brews and then extending to 15 or 20 seconds. So this would be, I would say, the most common way. Let's call this standard gongfu, okay? And this one we're going to call extended gongfu. So start that. We're going to go 30 seconds on this. And I'm brewing dry style, so I have to be a little bit neater than maybe I normally am. Good luck. And as I said, I'm going to add 5 seconds for each subsequent infusion. And what's going to be interesting here is to experience the difference between the longer, let's say the extended gong fu and the standard gong fu, but also how many infusions does it give me? Okay, I'm going to open these up, let them dissipate steam. Now, as I said, very important with Yancha, taste it. Don't taste it when it's straight out because it's going to be boiling, but taste it while it's warm and then taste it a little bit later. Take some time with each infusion. Let it sit for a little bit longer maybe than you would potentially do with other teas, because you really will benefit from tasting the difference that a temperature drop makes. Okay, let's start with the standard gong fu. Okay, so taste. I'm getting those magnolias. I'm getting the orchids. It's very, very sweet in the mouth. I'm getting, I wouldn't say honey. I would say it's almost like fruit sugar, like a fructose kind of sweetness. I'm getting those cherries, dried cherries. I'm getting a little tang like peach, a little bit of pine resin. The finish or the texture is very soft, sweet, quite bright rendition of this tea. Lovely. Let's taste the 30-second brew. Different, as you'd expect. Let's talk about some of the similarities. It's still sweet. It's still got the peach notes. It's got the orchid. But the difference is that this one has a richer taste, more body as well in the mouth. The texture is much more physical. So I'm getting much more of the yen yun, what I look for in a yancha. I'm getting that bite, a tiny catch at the back of the throat, leading to that vaporous, very filling in the mouth feel. Really, really has lots of volume in the mouth. The downside, if there is any, or it's just a comparison, is that this is softer. So if you like a softer tea, then this might be a better brewing method. And I'm picking up a little bit more of those flowery top notes, primarily because this one is so rich in taste that those top notes seem to sort of get a little bit drowned out, right? However, this is definitely my preferred infusion. It's got bags of flavor and bags of texture, and it's just doing lots of things in my mouth, compared with this one, which has lots of the aromatics but less of that inner leaf material. And so we'll talk about this. I know I talk about this a lot in my oolong videos, but let's just quickly go through it again. I like to sort of differentiate that there are sort of two broad categories of compounds that you're extracting from the tea. The first is the aromatics, which if it's an oolong and it's been rolled, are on the leaf surface. And those aromatics tend to, be very aromatic, right? So lots of transient notes that you can pick up on your nose, but you can also pick up through retronasal aroma. So in other words, when the tea is in the mouth, the aromatics are coming up and you're getting a lot of that in the nose. And that combination of taste and aromatics becomes flavor. And then there are the compounds which require the water to penetrate the leaf a bit more. They're the compounds that come from inside the leaf, or within the beneath the leaf surface, and they tend to contribute much more to texture, to aftertaste, to length of finish, physicality, and not just physical but also like juiciness and all of the beautiful transformations that happen in terms of the mouth, in terms of like saliva production, dryness, etc. And they also contribute to certain tastes, and the tastes tend to be much more in the sort of woodsier, vegetal, leaf-like tastes, right? And so what I'm noticing here is very aroma forward, and this one is more balanced. I'm getting the aroma because there's bags and bags of aroma in Yancha. So in many ways, you don't need to worry too much about maintaining them because there's so much aroma in Yanchas. But what I'm getting here is bags and bags of aroma, but also I'm getting the taste, the texture, and the and the finish, the length of finish. Definitely my preferred brew. And I think what this farmer in Wuyi taught me is don't be frightened of pushing the brews, and that will be the theme that will be the conclusion to this video. Is that longer brewing times are worth experimenting with. It's nice, but it feels like it's just opening up and hasn't really developed in terms of that mouthfeel, body, taste, and texture. Okay, let's do infusion number 2. I know people sort of like wincing as I pour away tea, but I'm going to be drinking a lot of infusions very quickly here, so I can't drink absolutely everything. Let's smell the empty cup while that's warming up. And there is a huge, huge difference here. So this really, really reflects what I'm talking about. This one, the mineral and the inner leaf material, I don't know exactly what it is, but the compounds that lead to a vaporous, extended, long finish in the mouth are much less present in the shorter infusion, which stands to reason. Okay, I'm getting still some lovely taffy candies, like peach taffy candies. I'm getting some milk, so stone milk. I am getting that milkiness. So I'm getting creamy, sweet, and slightly fruity. But on this one here, it's that, but like elevated. So the volume has been turned up, and I'm picking up more of those guava notes and just a richer, warmer fruitiness about the tea. Okay, so let's get the stopwatch. So now I'm going to be doing 15 and 35. Reset this. 15 seconds here. And I'll brew this one at 10 so that we can take a shortcut. Pour this off. So that's 15 seconds now here. And we're going to pour this one off when that hits 35 seconds. I was amazed when I was in Wuyi at the length of their brewing times. It was it really sort of made its mark on me. I thought, wow, they brew it long. And, you know, I'm sort of used to that when you go traveling, the farmers tend to brew quite hard their teas because they're farmers and they're used to drinking it. And so it just sort of, I guess you just sort of always tend to brew stronger as you get into tea. But it was quite remarkable. Take a look at the color. Not that much difference in color. And this is another point that I want to bring up with Yancha, is let's not get too fixated on color when it comes to strength of infusion. Because oftentimes that is deceptive. You might get pigments that release themselves quite readily or take longer. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be more flavorful or less flavorful if it's darker or if it's lighter. Right, let's taste this. Okay, better infusion, more texture, but it still feels a little bit empty. Yes, there's no risk here. I'm not having anything that's too aggressive. But because Yancha is a low bitterness tea, as we talked about before, and because the aromatics are generally occupying that sort of low to medium range, okay, pushing up into the floral range a little bit, but more low to medium range, I find that the longer infusions are perfectly acceptable because you don't get excessive bitterness and the aromatics hold. If the aromatics were very, very high, bright, transient aromas, then the longer infusions might dissipate them too much. So this is great. It's a lovely tea. I still don't think it's hitting its peak. I still think it's sort of like, it's the kind of tea that I would maybe serve to somebody who I'm just sort of testing them out a little bit. Like, are you going to get into Yancha? Because I don't want it to be too textured. But as I have developed a love for Yancha, I'm looking for that texture. That's primary for me. It's one of the primary markers that I'm looking for. Okay, let's taste this 35-second brew. Okay, as you can probably guess, this is my preferred brew. Now, the criticism, if it is a criticism for you for this brew or this longer brewing time, is you're going to bring out more of the woody notes of the tea. When you have a lower quality Yancha, you might want to be erring a little bit more on the side of shorter brews because it might be excessive in the woodiness, or the woody notes might taste a bit stewed. This doesn't. The woody notes on this are lovely. They're pine. I'm picking up pine. I'm picking up a little cranberry sourness. So the fruits, the sort of sour, slightly sour fruits, the red currants, the cranberries, which I absolutely love. And then the cask note of like the bourbon casks and the pines, that's coming through on this. And I'm getting, again, a lot more physicality, a lot more juiciness, a longer finish. Sweet, creamy, light. As it cools down, I'm getting more of the creaminess. I'm getting buttercreams. Yeah, it's lovely. Lovely buttery buttercreams and peaches notes to it. As this cools down, those pines are even more resinous. I'm getting like a frankincense quality to it. So aromatic, deep, complex resin notes to this tea. And that little kick of cranberry sourness, it's very, very gentle, but it's enticing, it's engaging, it makes you sort of focus. This is a safe option. Sweet and creamy, but again, I feel like it's not reached its peak. All right, I'm going to roll through some infusions. I'll brew them up, and then we'll come back and do each one as a separate tasting so that you don't have to watch me brewing all these teas. Third infusion. So we've got 20 seconds and 40 seconds. I believe that's correct. Let's see if the theme continues. This is going to be hot. Yeah, I would say even maybe less enjoyable than the second infusion. It's again, just very safe, very sweet, very soft, lovely, enjoyable, but just doesn't have the impact that I'm looking for when I drink a Yancha. This one here. Now bear in mind that this has had like a total of, maths, a total of nearly over 100 seconds of brewing. Okay, we're at 30, 35, that's 75. So we've had 105 seconds of brewing compared with this one here, which had 10, 15, there's 25, which has had 45 seconds, 105 seconds. Correct me if my maths is wrong. But it's a big difference, right? So you'd expect that one to actually potentially be moving into like losing some of its character. Let's see. Not at all. Just so much more. Everything I said before. Texture, taste, aftertaste, that little fruity, the extra fruit, little bit of that, little bit of, when I say sourness, I don't want, it's like a zing of acidity which then passes and then moves to juiciness. Really, really much, much more complete experience. Right, let's move on to infusion 4. We'll do like 4, in fact, I'll keep brewing and then let's meet on the 6th infusion and we'll see how we're doing. Okay, I'm brewing up the 6th infusion. So this is going to be 35 seconds and 55 seconds. And we will compare them. The previous 2 infusions, exactly the same theme. This one, for me, never hit a peak. It was always a little bit too soft. Pleasant, easy drinking, as I said, but a little bit too soft. Didn't really give me the impact that I'm looking for. And that is what I've noticed a lot of times. This, the frustration that I've had with Yancha has been, I feel like I need to get more out of it somehow. And it just wasn't happening. Let's take a look at the color of the liquor. Now we can probably say, ooh, it's about even, but I would say that one's slightly darker. So now, this is going to be the interesting part. Is it going to take over now? Is this one going to drop off? And therefore, you might want to brew shorter in order to get more length and have, you know, more infusions. And maybe this is a lot better. Let's give it a taste. Very nice. Like, I don't want to say anything bad against it, but as with all of the other infusions, even though this has now hit 35 seconds, which is like the 2nd infusion of this one, which was like bags of texture, this still doesn't give me that texture. And that's the really interesting part here, is that even if you get to those longer brewing times towards the middle and end of your session, 6th infusion, it doesn't give me that yen yun oomph that I'm looking for. The finish is still a bit short as well. Let's taste this one. Again, I prefer that infusion. A little bit more woody, as I said, but I like the quality of the woody note in this. But I'm getting more texture. I'm getting more oomph, more bite. Sorry to be a broken record, but what's interesting here is that, as I said, even though this has now moved into that extended brewing time, it's still not giving it to me. Still not giving me that yen yun that I'm looking for. And this one has dialed down the aromatics. It's obviously getting into the lighter phase of this tea session. This is the 6th infusion, but it's still a very, I would still call it a, you know, a good quality infusion. It's not in that sort of, well, it's sort of on the tail end now. It's still a great infusion. It still has bags of flavor and a lot more texture than this one here. It tastes empty, this one. Right, I know. Everybody out there, I know. I'm pouring away Yancha, very high quality Yancha, but I want to just brew one more infusion and then I'm going to taste the returning cup and then we're going to give you some of my conclusions here. The smell of the empty cup. More even, but this one is still stronger. And I'm getting soft serve ice cream. I'm getting a little peppery note as well, like I want to say like as if you had a chrysanthemum soft serve ice cream, although that doesn't exist, but that's sort of what it smells like. And again, those taffy candies. Okay. Don't really enjoy the whole stopwatch thing, but we're doing it because we want to be accurate here. So let's go. So this is 40 seconds. And a minute. Now, of course, you know, there's plenty of variation that you can do here. Maybe you could brew that at 40 seconds or 30 seconds to begin with, and then stay at 30 seconds and then move up a bit later. You know, there's a whole wealth of different experiments that you can do. The purpose really of this video is to, number one, sort of explain the thinking behind how to brew Yancha, but also to really get this point across. Don't be frightened about testing its limits in terms of length of brew time. Oops, that was 43 seconds. What's interesting about the taste of that one is, what was I doing? This was a minute, so I got to do the calculation. So what was interesting about the taste of this one is that as it gets lighter, it actually starts to approach the early infusions of this one. So it's almost like you don't really miss out on those slightly softer, sweeter infusions. You get them towards the end. Again, slightly darker compared with this one. This obviously has more longevity to it. But what is the point of longevity if you don't have a peak? That's probably the crucial part of this video, is like, you can get lots of nice soft infusions out of this, like sweet, easy drinking infusions. But what's the point of having a long life if you don't have an intense life, right? What's the point of, you know, you should also have those peak moments. This one never hit a peak for me. And really, this reminds me of those early infusions of this one here. So I don't feel like I'm missing out. 7th infusion now, I don't feel like I'm missing out. So in my experiments, just because I don't want to brew too many in front of you, but in my experiments, what I found is that probably around this time, 7th or 8th infusion, they're very, very similar. They're sort of on a par in terms of their quality. And then maybe sort of 8th infusion to 10th infusion, yes, you get more out of the shorter or the standard Gongfu brewing style because obviously it's had less time in water. But it is surprising the longevity that these leaves give you. And let's not be fooled by that thinness of the leaf that we talked about earlier. It's surprising how much these delicate leaves give you when you brew them hard and long. You can get 7, 8. I mean, we're on the 7th and I'm really enjoying this still. I reckon you could get 8 to 10 infusions out of this. But probably the last few infusions, this one will be better. But the quality of the whole session is much better, I think, with longer infusions. Before we sort of conclude that, let's taste this returning cup. Now, look at this. And this is why I'll tell you right now, I'm not a big fan of this. I know a lot of people are, so again, you brew you, but look at that. For me, it's looking a bit murky, it's looking cloudy. Basically, it's oxidized. So let's taste it. Okay, so there is a slightly different character that I'm getting out of this colder rinse. I'm getting more of the cherry varnish note in it. So it's a nice taste. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a nice taste, but the problem that I have with it is it has a real oxidized quality in the taste and texture. So whilst I'm looking for that Yenyun mineral oomph in the texture, that's very different from an oxidized roughness. And this has an oxidized roughness to me. Taste is okay. The cool nature of it sort of brings out a different quality, maybe a little bit more of a sort of, like fruits and varnish quality to it. But that oxidized taste tastes like old tea to me. And so that's why I'm not a huge fan of this returning cup technique, although I know a lot of people love it. And so, as I said, enjoy what you enjoy. So let's try to bring some conclusions together with this Yancha brewing guide. I know it's been a bit here, there, and everywhere. Soft water, 4.5 to 7 grams of leaf per 100 ml. Make sure you have temperature that's right. Generally, hot is better. And then in terms of length of time, you've got a choice. Do you want with standard gong fu or shorter gong fu, sort of the 5, 10, 15 seconds in terms of your first brews? That will give you probably a couple more infusions and you'll get soft, sweet, easy drinking tea. However, in my view, you're missing the main event of Yancha, which is that balance between all of those aromatics and the taste and the texture and the aftertaste and that yen yun that that rock oolongs are so famous for. You're missing that if you don't brew longer. What's interesting is that because the tea has bags of aromatics, you don't get a lot of aromatic loss by brewing longer. Also interesting is because the aromatics occupy that medium to low territory, sort of medium high fruits to the woody territories. Also, longer brewing times I find don't dissipate those aromatics because they're not these bright high aromatics. Also interesting is despite the fact that the leaf looks quite thin and delicate, it has a lot of longevity. You can brew it for long periods of time over extended infusions and you can get a lot out of it. That is the thing that I think surprised me the most because I thought, oh God, I've got to try to, preserve the potency of this, of Yancha by brewing short. In my experience in these experiments, that is not the case. You will get lots of infusions, even brewing long with this tea. And interestingly, as it brews out, it sort of becomes like the early infusions of the short gong fu. So you're getting more of that sweet, easy drinking, light taste. So I don't think you miss out on anything by brewing for extended periods of time. Whereas conversely, this one here, even once you get to those extended brewing times of 40 plus seconds, it seems like the inner leaf compounds which contribute, in my assumption is that they contribute to this yen-yun, overarching yen-yun experience. It seems like they sort of get taken out slowly in this one over your first few infusions. And by the time you hit 40 seconds here, you're still not getting it. It's like it's gone. It's like you're always chasing it and it's never quite there. And so I don't think that even once this gets to 50, 60 seconds, you're going to get that same experience. And so whilst this will certainly give you more infusions by few infusions, you miss the main event. The main event comes from longer brewing times, in my opinion. So what are the starting sort of brewing times that I would recommend? I would say that if you're brewing at sort of 5 grams per 100 ml, then you want to be sort of starting at about 30 seconds like I've done. If you are really packing the guy one with like say 7 grams, then you might want to drop to 20 seconds. But I still, with 7 grams, I still would recommend that you brew not the sort of 5, 10, 15 seconds that is often talked about. And finally, the returning cup flavor, it's just not for me. It's not something that I particularly enjoy. I know a lot of people do. For me, I can't get over that oxidized taste and texture. Let me know your thoughts on brewing up Yancha. I know I've opened up a whole Pandora's box of opinions out there, and I'm happy to hear them. Obviously, as I said, the type of Yancha is going to make a difference. Probably if it's a lighter colored Yancha, you may want to drop the temperature slightly, and you may want to be playing around with shorter brewing times because the aromatics tends to be slightly higher and therefore more transient. So there's lots of experimenting and there's plenty more to dive into. But those are my guidelines. Let me know how you get on. That's it, tea heads. Check out our other videos, taste our teas wherever you're in the world by browsing mayleaf.com, and come visit us if you're ever in London. Other than that, I'm Don from Mayleaf. Thank you for being part of the revelation of true tea. Stay away from those tea bags. Keep drinking the good stuff and spread the word, because nobody deserves bad tea. Bye.